Welcome back here today on the beautiful campus of Florida Panhandle Technical College. We have sort of an unusual story for you today. If you're a regular viewer of the show, you're certainly aware that we are usually upbeat, we are informative, we're educational. We bring you what you want to hear. What we bring you today is something you're going to want to hear. However, it's a little bit different bent. It's a story about a young gentleman that from here in Chipley went away to school, falsely accused of some things, finding out what exactly is the power of the press, finding out that if it bleeds, it leads, as the journalists say, and everybody wants to carry that cutting-edge story, but when you're found innocent, when you're exonerated, when the story is not as glamorous anymore, they don't carry that story or they bury it someplace on page 20. When we come back, we're going to be talking to James Fletcher Dilmore, recent graduate of Chipley High School, even more recent graduate of Florida State University. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Mr. Dilmore about his experience, his initiation into politics and adulthood and all of the injustice that at some point in time we all experience. But it's a compelling story, probably one that you're not going to want to miss, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is James Fletcher Dilmore. I know him as Fletcher, and with your permission, I will call you Fletcher. Is that okay?
Certainly, sir.
I appreciate you taking the time. Interestingly, we became familiar. We've known you for a good while, obviously, and knew you when you were in high school. If you follow Chipley High School football, this is the guy that kicked the point after, did the punting, and so forth. You went away to school. We got to work with you a little bit in the Young Republicans of Washington County.
Yes, sir.
And followed your progress. Recently, the first of the year, we're hit with some bad news. There were some allegations against you. And as the media does, like a shark smelling blood in the water, I started off in the introduction saying, if it bleeds, it leads. I spent a lot of time in radio and television. And in that world, the most glamorous, horrific stories are the ones who get the most attention. When those stories are resolved, when that missing child is found, when that person who was accused of some heinous crime is exonerated, that is shuffled under the carpet and it's never broadcast or never made public. When I found out what has become the end of your story, for you, just the beginning probably, and we're going to talk about that, I wanted to let the world know, in whatever way we were able, to explain to the community, certainly to start with, our local community, but any who are interested, exactly what your situation was, your experience in that situation. And just in our pre-show, being able to talk to you, Fletcher, I know that you want your story to be out there. One thing that is interesting to me, and one of the impetus for us even getting involved in this situation, you mentioned that because of the news that came out about your situation, now when you go looking for a job subsequent to graduation, they Google you, just like they look at your Facebook page anymore, employers do, or potential employers, and that's affected you negatively.
Yes, sir.
Because of that. Let's start at the beginning. You and your family here in Chipley, you went to Chipley High School. Talk a little bit about from that point forward.
Yeah, I'm a proud alumni of Chipley High Fighting Tiger. I started the Young Republicans Club there at Chipley. I was probably the first of its kind. Went on to Chipola for 1 year, graduated, and then went on to Florida State, where I joined a fledgling but doing very well college Republican club there. Spent my second year there as the vice president, and then third year, overwhelmingly elected as the president of the club. I took a club of roughly 75 people and led it to a membership of a little over 500 people. We had regular attendances of over 150 people. It's fantastic. We brought in big cutting-edge speakers, folks that big headliners. We were even set to bring in Dinesh D'Souza for our end-of-the-year gala. As I was coming back from the inauguration of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, I started getting calls from news outlets everywhere, including the Tallahassee Democrat, which drives a lot of traffic and is very prominent in Tallahassee, certainly, about some allegations that have been made by the Florida Federation of College Republicans.
Now, this is in January.
This is, yes, sir, late January. I was actually leaving the Baltimore airport, heading back to Tallahassee, when I first got the call from the Tallahassee Democrat about the story, wanting to know if I'd make any comments. And certainly I was shocked and did not want to make any comments on something I knew nothing about.
I want to stop you right there. Let's back up a little bit. You have been known the entire time I've known you as someone who speaks your mind, not necessarily politically correct, much like me. And so I feel a kinship for you or through you due to that similarity. Ronnie Davis here actually lives in Jackson County, but here in Chipley, one of the board members of One South Bank here in Chipley, along with myself, up until recently, were the only two people that I've ever known that have, in my conversations, have fully and unequivocally supported Donald Trump since the very beginning. Many people have supported Cruz or some of the other candidates, and when they dropped out or they looked like they weren't going to be able to carry what they needed, they converted to Trump. So they considered themselves a longtime Trump supporter. Like it or not, Ronnie and I have been two of those people since the very beginning. You told me today that you are the third one, to my knowledge.
Yes, it could definitely be said that I may have had a hand in the founding of Knowles for Trump at Florida State. Definitely so.
Tallahassee, as a matter of fact, we're here in Chipley, Florida, middle of the Panhandle. The farther east you go from here, the more the Democrat Party becomes pervasive. The farther west you go from here, the more the Republican Party becomes pervasive. Just here in Washington County, the percentages of Democrat versus Republican has reversed just in the last few years, and now the Republicans have many more registered voters than the Democrats do at this point, and it's getting more all the time. We're seeing that start to happen in Jackson County. I think there are at least 2 Republican county commissioners now for the very first time ever. It's always been strictly voting down the party line, all Democratic. So that said, Tallahassee, very Democratic stronghold, and the Tallahassee Democrat being a very liberal paper, no harm, no foul, but they are definitely not conservative or embracing any of what we would consider the traditional Republican values.
No, and I would say overwhelmingly the staff and administration of Florida State is very liberal. It's a very liberal-dominated place. But interestingly enough, the college Democrats routinely would never have attendances greater than 10 to 15 members of their club, while we were having extravagant numbers of people showing up, well over 150 on a regular basis.
What is that indicative of? You know, because there are a lot of people that swear they're Democrats, that they support whoever that Republican or that Democrat candidate is, but there almost seems to be a lack of interest.
Well, yeah, so right now the liberal agenda, the liberal mindset is definitely the dominant culture right now in America. It's very out there, it's very pervasive, it's in your face on a regular basis, and it creates a counterculture of what is cool. And we've gotten to a point where conservatism is the new cool thing, which is fantastic.
Does that progressive liberal left have 51% of the power of the people? Obviously, that didn't show in the polling places, but that could be attributed to people just simply not coming out to vote. But do you feel that the pendulum has swung to the point where people who are on entitlements, people who are taking advantage of all the giveaway programs, and I am not talking here about retirees or people in Social Security in any way, shape, or form, or senior people that depend on that stuff, but rather those who are working the system, do you feel that we have gone to the point where over 50% of those people those people make up over 50% of our population?
I don't know. I don't think there's a particular way to be able to tell that, but I can definitely say without a doubt the left is far more vocal with their ideology and their belief system than the conservatives or the Republicans.
I know we're a little off topic from the original subject, but I think it's important, and it does tell some of the backstory. Today, or at least as those of the last time that you spent time in Tallahassee, are we seeing some of the Antifa? Are we seeing some of that semi-violent reaction to the Trump administration? You
know, they definitely do exist. They're definitely on campus. They're very pervasive. They do stop traffic on a fairly regular basis in Tallahassee. They're still very, very violent, very malicious. They're still very much there. I do not particularly think they are the biggest threat. I'm not afraid of them by any means, but they are there.
What's interesting is that there are several states that have already introduced legislation that will basically ensure that you will not be prosecuted if you're on a freeway doing 60 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you come over the top of a hill and there's 100 people trying to block the freeway, and you end up plowing through them, that you will not be prosecuted for that, which makes total sense to me. Are we seeing, I use the word snowflake, and I know I offend people sometimes when I say that, but we see them all the time. I think here in Chipley, and I consider this a salt of the earth area, Washington County, Jackson Holmes Bay, even southeast Alabama, this area, conservative, spiritual, hardworking, good family values, even single parent families, you see success, you see progress, you see good students. So my point, though, or my question is, I know you see the snowflakes, but do you see many around here?
No, not particularly in the Panhandle, but I think the snowflake is definitely the term to use. These are the same people, just to kind of go back towards my situation, it's people that are very much offended just by the fact I supported Donald Trump within the own Republican Party are the people that made these allegations. They were just so hurt by the divisiveness of what Trump has to say in his very pro-American rhetoric that they went out of their way to make up such devastating and audacious rumors about me.
Let's go ahead and pick your story up at that point. What were these allegations?
So one of them was sexual harassment. One of them was asking for sexual favors for e-board positions. And another one was that we stole money from a club, from our club.
Now, I know when I first read the initial news reports, there was you and another gentleman
right,
named.
my treasurer, Ben Hodes. Yes, sir.
And it seemed like I never saw anything that was attributed to you as far as the misappropriation of funds. It seemed like that was always attributed to him. Were you indeed also part of that?
Well, I mean, as the president, yes, sir, I would be definitely liable for any funds as well in checking the treasurer. The only issue we ran into is that we never had more than $1,200 in our club, and certainly if you never have more than $1,200, it's rather difficult to spend and still $16,000. So no one's really figured out where that came from. The FSU PD even asked the question of, wow, someone must really not like you guys, was their direct statement towards us, because this is completely fraudulent and made up.
In the pre-show, in our discussion, you filled in some of the blanks for me, so I don't want to run the risk of glossing over some of those things that our viewers are going to want to know, and it fleshes out this whole situation. You said that there were multiple investigations, including the club itself.
Right. So I went through two different investigations with the school. One through Title IX, which is a program to investigate any sort of sexual discrimination that takes place, and then a student conduct investigation, which then investigates to see if there's any student conduct codes that were broken or if the student violated any laws.
One thing that you mentioned really struck me when it came to the sexual harassment charges. You were accused of calling or using the title "ma'am."
Yes, the very offensive, derogatory terms such as "ma'am." It is very heartbreaking, and you definitely shouldn't have any respect for people anymore. That's definitely out the window. You're not allowed to do that.
I can even understand a female being somewhat offended if you say "sweetie" or "hey honey," in a diner asking for more coffee. I get it that some people could be sensitive to that, and I'm good with that. I always thought "ma'am" was a term of respect, and certainly what I was taught to say.
Well, yes, certainly it is. Apparently there must be some big cultural divide and shift to where someone could look at that offensively. But the biggest kicker on this, the person that said that it was very offensive that I used the term "ma'am" in regard to women was a man. So we're at that again. I lacked even female accusers on any of the charges that were brought against me. The only charges was one guy. And it was one guy that had it out for my particular job.
The thing that really gets me is the fact that it was your own Republican club that initiated the charges and that right up until the end was pushing for you to be punished in whatever way.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly kind of the rhetoric we found ourselves in, where the Republicans are eating at themselves. We're dividing from a more liberal-based Republicans, I assume that was how we describe my opposition, to more of a strictly conservative Republican as myself.
Maybe a superfluous question to ask, but Do you suppose that some of this is in direct response to the fact that Trump won? Because that has caused great divisiveness within the Republican Party.
Oh, yeah, certainly. No, I mean, it's safe to say if you watch the news, even most Republicans are not happy that Trump is in charge. They do not like this change, this new era where the establishment is no longer in control, that the power is now back to the common man. They do not like that. There's no more political elite in charge. The American people have shown their power.
So you've got this unique dynamic where you don't have Republican versus a Democrat, you don't have conservative versus liberal, rather you have what has become the administration and certainly huge groundswell support for Trump and everything that he proposes to do versus the balance of that Republican Party, and then certainly all of those others that are on the left, including the Democratic Party and so forth.
Well, certainly. I mean, another way you could probably look at this is just within the state of Florida, there's a big cultural divide from the Panhandle and the rest of the state. Tallahassee, Florida State University is not comprised of mostly Panhandle students. It's mostly SoFlo and Central Florida students. So someone like me who comes from Chipley, Florida, who's very rural, very southern culturally, may come off to a lot of these people who probably come from much more northern backgrounds as just either probably some stupid cowboy or some redneck. So that's one of the things they'll look at, and I'm kind of othered. I'm very much pushed out, not in that same inner circle of that political hierarchy for not being from the same cultural background as they are.
Well, in reading between the lines, you also didn't know your place. You're very outspoken. You're not necessarily politically correct. Rather, what you were trying to do is accomplish the job that you took on as this president versus trying to make sure that nobody got their feelings hurt.
Right, and by me being different than what most people are at Florida State, by me being Southern, by me having a strong Southern accent and coming from a far smaller background, it definitely draws more attention to me. And a lot of times the biggest problem people have is when others start attracting power. People that are not themselves. People that have traditionally had power starting to lose it, much like how Trump has done with the political establishment.
Okay, so you attracted the attention of and made mad many of these people within your own Republican club. They countered...
Not many, just a few. That's the sad part. Because keep in mind, the people that 150 people regularly come to our meetings, the only people that really had any problems were 4 or 5 people.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, no. So the reason, typically speaking, on if you want to impeach someone or get someone out, it goes to club vote. They specifically stated in their letter there was no way, and they specifically told the student conduct court that there was no way to impeach me because the vast majority of the members of our club loved me. Welcome to America.
All right, so you're accused of this by a very small portion of your club membership.
5 or 6 people.
This is passed on to the school.
Right.
And also to your state organization.
Correct.
What else have we not talked about that investigation? Is there?
So the people within my club that had issue, they just took offense that I was offending the militant liberal groups such as the Antifa and the far left. They just took offense that I referred to them in one face. Their big issue was I took offense to them by referring to them as the people that did not bathe in a Facebook post, as if that is the most horrific thing you could ever do. And frankly, it's pretty accurate. I've spent time around them. I can say without a doubt, the smell consistency of these people would probably lead someone to think they do not bathe. Fair. I think it's good. They sent this letter saying I was mean. I was more or less bullying them, that they didn't feel as though they had enough power, if they didn't feel as though they had enough, they were contributing enough. Granted, I completely agree. They definitely were not contributing. It was one of those cases of the 20% doing 80% of the work of an organization. They passed it on to the Florida Federation of College Republicans, where we had someone that was sitting there waiting just for anything at all to try to make some scandal to get me out of power. And that's where the ridiculous allegations became made, because where they went from our club to the state organizations, where they went from he's mean and he says mean things about other organizations to he is sexually harassing and asking for sexual favors and they're stealing money. It just blew up, and no one's really been able to piece together exactly why, and I really do look forward to figuring out where that came from.
Well, and as part of the story, and one of the parts that glaringly got my attention was that it was even stated by the people doing the investigation that, and by those making the charges, that they didn't know who said it, or where the charges came from, but they believed it to be true, and so therefore you were prosecuted for it.
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, if someone says something but no one knows who said it and no one's exactly sure where it came from, but we already got a story about it, it must be true. It's just a ridiculous set of circumstances that, when reflecting on it, any rational person looks at this as one of the most puzzling of things.
So even if the door slammed shut at this point, you've been accused, it's been carried in the media, online, the buzz is around within your organization, within your school, within your state organization, the damage is done at that point. And,
certainly.
And regardless of what happens going forward, you're that guy.
I certainly am. Unfortunately, it was definitely an uphill battle, but once we were able to get a report from the school out stating my innocence, I actually got some sympathy from the guy that originally wrote my first article with the Tallahassee Democrat, where he did publish it, Byron Dobson. He did very good by me, but the unfortunate part is all those other articles are still the top search results, and I'm having a hard time getting the other news outlets to even write a news story to update what they put out there. Even if you Google search my name, one of the big things, I'm just all over these random message boards with people just taking shots at me. The other thing that just really gets me is how inconsiderate people are and how little empathy they have for folks, or how little they investigate things. I got death threats for quite a while. I got just hate mail constantly. People I knew would just go on Facebook and write these posts about how they had no respect for Florida State University for allowing me to even continue attending, that I should be in jail.
In one of your statements, and I'm not sure where that exactly was, but I read it online, you mentioned that you even got some blowback from people in your own community.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, no, within Chipley, I had people write full-on Facebook posts. I was the subject of a lot of different different views of negativity. People that have been my friends my whole life, I haven't heard from them since. They won't associate with me anymore. And to some degree, I can kind of understand it, because there was so much negativity surrounding me and who I am in my name. So being associated with me at that point in time with all that negative publicity looks bad.
You mentioned, and what got my attention as well as part of your story, was the fact that you had a couple of dream jobs in mind to which you applied after school. And what happened?
Unfortunately, one of the employers that had offered me a job rescinded their offer after Googling my name and seeing these negative stories. And unfortunately, at the time, I didn't have anything. I didn't have any other news outlets that had published a revision. It took me several weeks after getting the actual paperwork from the school saying I was completely cleared of everything before I could finally find anyone to publish it. And that definitely hampered me, but it's one of those situations where you're essentially damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're disclosing that you're going through a situation, my personal viewpoint was I hadn't done anything. I wasn't guilty of anything, and if anything, if I tell you ahead of time that these stories are out there but I have no proof behind it, I mean, you're not going to hire me anyway. So it was a very bad situation that I was put in.
Where do you go from here? You mentioned that there may be a suit pending that you've brought to bear.
There may very well be. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Obviously, somebody feels that you have some need for recourse, some opportunity to recoup that which you may have lost, and some of that it may be intangible, just simply based on reputation.
Certainly. But as it stands, the biggest thing my concern is moving forward each and every day is just trying to find another wonderful opportunity to start my career and start building up a resume and trying to put this behind me as much as I can.
As a public relations firm, we have been hired several times over the last 10, 12 years, especially since social media has become so prevalent, to work on behalf of a business or an individual who may have been charged with something, much like yourself, that proved to be wrong. In a couple of cases, people who were charged for things that they did do, but nonetheless wanted to clean up their reputation online. We found, and I don't think it's any mystery, that you don't get rid of anything that's online. Once it's shared and liked, especially on Facebook and some of the other social media, once it's broadcast out there and on somebody's website, it lives forever. All you can really do is heap good stuff on top of what may be not so good, and then when there's a Google search, the good stuff comes up and not the bad.
Yes, certainly, and I've actually contacted some of those companies that are reputation defenders more so online, and it's just outrageous what they charge to do that. It's anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 to try to help you get back your innocence and get back your reputation. It's just very unfortunate, but...
Well, trust me when I tell you that you are as well suited to do it yourself simply by doing shows such as this that are going to be broadcast, putting as many things out as possible, taking your story to news gatherers and saying, here's my story. Would you like to do an interview? Would you like to talk to me? You're going to have to be proactive about something.
Oh, certainly. I completely agree, and I just thank you so very much for this wonderful opportunity to start to begin and do that.
Well, it's not like we're Don Quixote tilting at windmills, and we're certainly not trying to go against the establishment, but we see every single day the media, the broadcast media, the print media, do and say and affect lives negatively. And again, anybody can make a mistake. Anybody can report something because it came out from a law enforcement agency or from another reporting agency. But to me, part of what goes along with that, and they're the ones that are calling themselves journalists, part of what goes along with that sense of journalism is that they, in the interest of full disclosure, give all the rest of the story when it becomes appropriate.
Right. I would totally agree that it is very much their responsibility, if they're going to report the beginning of a story, to also have the conclusion of the story as well.
Unfortunately, that is not as sexy, that is not as attention-getting, that doesn't sell newspapers or TV time or advertising time, so that's why they don't. I get that part. There's a very pragmatic reason why they don't. Nobody wants to hear the dull stuff. Hey, this guy was found not guilty today. Hey, this guy was let go today. Nobody wants to hear that stuff, unfortunately, except the people that love you. And in your case, I would imagine that you found out, and you already have pointed out to some extent, who your friends are. I would imagine you had an outpouring of support, though, from the community friends.
No, once everything came out that it was very positive, even before the positive articles started to emerge, I did have a lot of support from people from back home, from people that were my friends in Tallahassee. It's been wonderful. It's been fantastic as far as that goes. And you certainly understand who your friends are, and frankly, that's probably better for the long run anyway.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for opening the scar, opening the wound. I would imagine it may be getting easier to talk about. At the same time, conversely, it's probably getting harder to talk about because every day, every week, you're looking at missed job opportunities. I know you enough to know that you're a hard worker, that you're tenacious, and that you're going to make something happen. I also believe that that God doesn't put anything in our path that we can't overcome. And the old saying that I don't quite believe in, but that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You put all that together in a stew, and I think that you're going to be fine. But thank you for taking the time, and thanks for sharing with us your story.
No, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Our guest today has been Fletcher Dilmore. What can you say? You've heard the story. You make up your own mind. You just hope that if you one day are accused of something, that first of all, your friends and family and those who you feel should and have professed to be your friends treat you the same way, give you the benefit of the doubt, and then more importantly, if you're a journalist, if you're a news gatherer, if you're a TV, newspaper, radio, online especially, run the whole story. When somebody is exonerated, found not guilty, when charges are dropped, I know it's not fun. I know it's not the part that makes your income. Please, try to publicize that part. There's somebody around every corner, just like Fletcher, that could easily be your son, your grandson, one day your father, and they deserve better than that. We'll be right back.